Hey everybody, my name is Deja and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going over all the books that I read in May. I read quite a few really good books in May. I think the majority of the books that I read was 4 stars and above. I didn't have too many like all-time favorites or favorites of the year, but a lot of good books that I read. So I'm really excited to wrap up May with y'all. I always go over my statistics first, so let's get into those. In May, I read 12 books. 3 of those were by BIPOC authors and 2 of those had queer representation. I didn't have any rereads or DNFs, and I read a total of 4,340 pages. When it comes to genres, I read 1 dystopian, 1 fantasy, 3 horror, 2 literary fiction, 3 mystery, and 2 romance. Then for format, I read 7 via audiobook, 1 as an ebook, and 4 hybrid, which means it's a combination of audiobook, usually with either ebook or physical book, either tandem reading, or I switch off between audiobook and physically reading. For audience, 11 of them were adult, and I had 1 middle grade. For ratings, I had 1 2-star, 1 3-star, 3 3.5 stars, 3 4 stars, 3 4.5 stars, and 1 5-star. And then everything I read was novels this month. And then for author status, I had 3 debut authors, 4 new to me authors, and 5 repeat authors. I don't track this monthly in my statistics, but I did want to mention 8 of the books that I read this month I physically own. So the majority of the books I physically own, which is really good. I'm still trying to catch up on my ratings blanket. Here she is so far. I've done 28 books so far. So I do have quite a bit to still go because I think I've read over 60 books so far this year, so I'm about halfway done, but we still have some catching up, so I will still be crocheting this throughout this video. Of course, we're going to start off with my 2-star read, which is the lowest book that I read this month, and that was Remarkably Bright Creatures. I was so excited to read this book because I love the ocean and I love marine life, and it's always been something that I've had a great interest in, so I was anticipating this book so much. And basically we're following this woman, and she is a little bit older, like retirement age, and her husband recently passed away, and her son, when he was 18, went on a boat and ended up disappearing. So she doesn't really have much family or people in her life, so she, to kind of keep herself busy, begins to work at this aquarium basically as a like maintenance person or like someone who cleans up at night. She begins to strike up this relationship with a curmudgeonly octopus named Marcellus, and we also follow a third character. So we get our main character's perspective, I think her name's Tova, and then we get Marcellus's perspective, and then we also get a perspective of a third character, and it is a man who's like in his 30s, and he is honestly a whiny crybaby to me. He doesn't really know his parents super well because they kind of both left him when he was younger, and so he's been raised by a family member, and he kind of just doesn't really have his life together, and he blames all of his like childhood trauma on not having his life together as a 30-something-year-old man, and is whiny and wants everybody to take care of his issues for him, and then complains about people taking care of his issues for him. So we get all 3 of their perspectives, and I didn't hate this book, but when I think about it, I dislike it more than I like it. And for me, a 2.5 star is just middle of the road okay. So if I dislike it more than I like it, then it has to be below 2.5 stars. I really think what ruined it for me was that male main character. He was so awful and annoying and such a crybaby, and I couldn't stand him. And the one redeeming quality that this book really had for me, which was Marcellus and his perspective, was barely in the book compared to the other 2 perspectives. And Tova was fine. I liked some of the things that she was going through and that she talked about, but overall, I felt like this book was pointless and a waste of my time. Like, I could have been completely fine in my life if I never read this book. I didn't really have much enjoyment in this story besides Marcellus's perspective, which again wasn't in the story as much as I would have liked, and I thought like the aquarium atmosphere would kind of add a little bit more to the story, but it really didn't. Like, I feel like obviously it had to be set in an aquarium because Marcellus is an octopus, but besides that, I didn't really get much aquarium vibes, and so it was just fine overall, so 2-star for me. I forgot to mention that I read this book in my spring reading vlog, so I read this one and the next book. The next book I gave 3 stars, and that was Nightshade for Warning, and this is a cozy mystery that I read. It's the second in a series. Sorry if you guys hear the trash and stuff. On Wednesdays, they always do trash and everything like that, and I keep forgetting about it, and they also mow the lawn and stuff. stuff, so it's a little bit noisy. But Nightshade for Warning is the second book in a series. Basically, we follow our main character, and she runs kind of like a perfumery, so she makes perfumes and stuff like that, and she sells them. But she also has a garden where she grows flowers and stuff like that to make her perfumes. And honestly, I really couldn't tell you anything about this mystery. I don't really remember it, which is why I gave it 3 stars. Because every single time I read a cozy mystery, for the most part, I'm having a good time. Like, I'm enjoying myself. And that was the same for this one. I had a good time reading it. But the majority of cozy mysteries are very formulaic, and that's like how the genre is meant to be. And so a lot of times I like something a little bit different in my cozy mysteries. I like something to kind of mix it up and make it stand out from the rest. And this didn't really have that element. So for me, it was just like an average read that wasn't super memorable. I don't really remember much about the mystery besides that I believe the person that was murdered was staying at a hotel, and our main character, her brother, ends up coming to town with his new girlfriend, and his girlfriend is the main primary suspect in the murder. So our main character is trying to like clear her name because she obviously doesn't want her brother's new girlfriend to, you know, get prosecuted or arrested or become under suspicion at all. This was a good time. It was a fun time to read. I like the spring vibes in the series because, like, obviously it has a lot to do with flowers and perfumes and stuff like that. So I really like the spring vibes, but overall it's just kind of like a fine book, and it's not anything that's going to stick with me for a really long time. The next book was also read in that spring reading vlog, and that is The Woman in the Garden, and this is another mystery. It's not a cozy mystery, but it's a mystery. I thought it was originally a thriller when I went into reading the book, and it's not. But basically, we're following our main character, and she is a professor of botanical toxicology, or she used to be, and she has a garden of poisonous plants, and she kind of just stays home and takes care of her plants. She's not really like outgoing. She's also neurodivergent, so she does just prefer to kind of like stick with her plants and just stay at home. Not saying that every neurodivergent person is like that, but it definitely plays a role in the story. And then she becomes hyper fixated on this new neighbor that she has, and she sees that this neighbor keeps bringing over different men. And then one day someone ends up breaking into her garden, her neighbor disappears, and then a man that her neighbor was talking to that our main character also knows ends up being poisoned. So now the police are looking at her because she obviously has this garden, but she was like, someone broke into my garden and could have easily stolen a plant from my garden to poison someone else. So she's trying to figure out the mystery of like, where did her neighbor go, who poisoned this man, and who broke into her garden. It was really fun. It was good. I liked our main character a lot. I thought she was very interesting, and I feel like if you like Emily from Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, you would like this main character. I think she definitely comes across in the book more neurodivergent than Emily, because I don't think Emily is explicitly stated to have been neurodivergent while our main character is in this book. But I just thought it was fun. Again, it's not something that's going to stick with me for a long time. I'm already forgetting a lot of the details about the book, but I remember really enjoying it when I read it, and as I said, the main character really stood out to me. My next 3.5 star is The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I only have one Grady Hendrix left. You guys can see he's all right back here, and so the only one I have left is We Sold Our Souls by him, and I've read everything else now. So this is a horror book where we are following this group of women who are all final girls. They all survived some sort of like massacre where everybody else who was with them got killed, but they survived. And they have this support group, obviously, with a therapist, where they all kind of just talk about being final girls together and their experiences and their trauma and how they're all dealing with it. And then this story kind of kicks off, obviously, with them being in this support group. But then one of the ladies in the support group gets killed, and then they start fearing that they're going to get picked off one by one. Again, this was a really fun one. I also really liked in the story seeing the final girls and how they all are very different from each other and how they all deal with their traumas of what they experience very differently. Like our main character, she's very hyper vigilant, like always on alert, always looking out for herself. She has locks, so many on her door. She literally has a cage actually on her door, and she's very hyper vigilant. And then some of the other characters are not like that at all. So I really like seeing the differences in their trauma. I will say the thing that really drew this book back from being a 4-star for me was the main character. I found her so insufferable in the first bit of this book, and I understand it was kind of for her to have character development, but at the same time I still found her highly annoying, and it did dampen my experience of the story. Personally, it just wasn't my favorite. I feel like in Grady Hendrix's books, usually his characters don't really stand out to me. I feel like there's a hair on my face. I feel like his characters don't really stand out to me. They're just kind of like average. characters that are used to tell the story, but they're not super characterized. And this one, I feel like our main character was definitely characterized a bit more than his other work, but she was distinct, not in a good way for me personally. And I kind of liked where it went. I do think it was a little bit too long, but it did kind of have like those fun slasher vibes. I love Grady Hendrix's writing. He's so camp, he's so fun, and so obviously I was going to enjoy this book regardless. I would say honestly this one is one of my least favorite from him. I think this one and My Best Friend's Exorcism are probably my least favorite. I know everybody loves My Best Friend's Exorcism, but it is like my least favorite from him, I think. So it's either The Final Girl Support Group or My Best Friend's Exorcism that is my least favorite. Horror Store is my third, but I love this one. And then probably How to Sell a Haunted House, Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, and The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. And I haven't read We Sold Our Souls, so I don't know yet, but I'm excited to read that one and finish off his back. My next 3.5 stars actually right here, and that is Bat Eaters and Other Names for Cora Zhang. And this one was another 3.5 star for me, as I said. This one was one that I actually thought was going to be like a favorite of the year. I thought it was going to be like my last year's version of The Eyes Are the Best Part. I love that story because they're both by Asian authors. I feel like they had kind of similar commentary in certain ways, not completely, but it is a horror story, both of them. So I thought I was going to enjoy this one very similarly to that one, and it did disappoint me a little bit. I don't have really much negative to say about this story because I think it did so many things well. I absolutely adored the commentary in this one. We're following Cora Zhang, and this one is a pandemic book. So it starts right at the beginning in April of 2020, and her sister is basically pushed in the New York City subway. She's decapitated by a train. It's a very like graphic and violent, the first scene. It's the first scene of the book. And this is done as a hate crime. The man that pushes her is a white man who says bat eater and does that because she is Asian. And so then we skip forward to, I think, August of 2020, and we're following her as she's actually a crime scene cleaner. So she cleans up crimes, obviously, and she works with 2 other crime scene cleaners, and we kind of follow them as they are investigating these murders that are happening of Asian women that are being killed. So obviously they see the crime scene, so they kind of know, and they believe that it's hate crime or that they're all connected because they all have to do with bats in some sort of way. And so they're investigating this, but we're also following Cora's grief. And so I really loved exploring her grief. She also has OCD, which I thought was interesting. I've seen a couple people talk about this, and a lot of people resonated with the OCD representation and a lot of people didn't. But I really liked seeing her grief and her OCD. I thought it was very interesting the way that it was done. And she is kind of an unreliable narrator. I think in the beginning of the story, you don't really know like which direction the story is going to take because you don't know. Like, she's just spiraling, so you don't know what's real, what's not, and you're like in her head, so you just don't know what is true and what is made up in her head and is because of her spiraling. But then obviously we also get great commentary on racism and xenophobia and what it was like to be an Asian person in America during this time and probably still today. I think the effects of COVID are still very long lasting to this day when it comes to racism, and so I thought that the commentary was very interesting because I haven't really read a fiction book that depicted that yet. I don't know if one has come out, so I really enjoyed that a lot. But this does go in a direction with the horror that was not my favorite. I think if I read the synopsis a little bit more, I would have been better prepared for the horror direction, but it just wasn't what I anticipated. And it's outside of my typical enjoyment of horror. I have read books that fall into like this camp and I have enjoyed them, but I never love them, you know? And so this one was just okay for me in that regard, but I did also really, really like the writing. It was so graphic, so gory, so disturbing. There is this scene with a washing machine. Crazy. And I love the crime scene cleanup element. It's just, again, the horror went in a direction that I didn't really enjoy. And then also this book was so fast to read. Like, it's already a short book and I literally listened to like 50% of this book and I was like, oh my god, like I'm 50% of the way in because I felt like not much happened in the first 50%, even though it was quick to read. I just thought it would be like the first 25% or something. So I feel like we could have had it be a little bit longer and be a little bit more fleshed out. Personally, I would have liked that a little bit better, but overall I think this was a really good book and I would highly recommend it. I think a lot of people will really love it and I think it's so valuable and I'm definitely going to be keeping it on my shelves. This is also my Patreon book club pick for the month of May, so we get a great discussion on this one over there. Now we're going to get into my 4 stars. It's crazy that 7 of the 12 books that I read this month were 4 stars and above. So the first one I have is Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. This is a romance and I read it at the very beginning of the month. In this book, we're basically just following this woman and she kind of just lives her life. I think she lives in New York City. She lives in like Brooklyn, I believe. She's very happy with her life. She kind of doesn't do exactly what her family wished that she did, but she enjoys her life, and she has a best friend named Willa, and they just kind of, you know, are girls together. But then she finds out that she is pregnant by a one night stand. And her best friend Willa has been trying to get pregnant, so this does have mentions of like infertility and trying to conceive. It's not like super, super heavy. It's in there, but it's not like what the whole book is about, because we're not following Willa. But depending on how you feel about that, it may or may not be something that you want to read. But she ends up getting pregnant by a one night stand. Willa is not really supporting her because she has a little bit of animosity because her best friend got pregnant on accident when she's been trying to get pregnant for a long time. And then Willa's brother, Shep, actually ends up stepping up, and it is their romance. So we do have talks of like co-parenting with the baby daddy and stuff like that. And I just really enjoyed this one. I like when babies and children are in books. I wouldn't actually say this one has a lot of babies and children because it's mostly like following her through her pregnancy, and then at the very end, obviously she's gonna have a baby eventually. And so I just really like this one. I liked the romance. I thought it was super like tender and heartfelt. The characters weren't super three-dimensional for me. They were a little tiny bit flat, but I think their relationship kind of made up for it. And then I just really like when pregnancy is in books. I don't really care what genre. It's just something that's always fascinated me. So I really like just seeing that element in this romance. Next up is the book that I read for my in-person book club, and that is Dungeon Crawler Carl. This is a RPG fantasy. We're following Carl, and he has a rocky relationship with his girlfriend, kind of ex-girlfriend, but he's outside one day at night trying to get her cat because her cat escaped. Her name is Donut. And he literally like threw on her Crocs, is in his boxers, whatever, and then all of a sudden the world collapses in on itself basically. So everybody who was in a car, a building, any kind of enclosed space died, and then the new world kind of emerged that is a big labyrinth kind of I forget the word. It's like a big game, basically, where it's multiple different levels and you're trying to get through the levels. And so now he's stuck with this cat, and the cat does play a big part in the story. People don't like to talk about the cat, apparently, because it's a spoiler. I don't think it's a spoiler, but the cat plays a very fun part and role in this story. But we're basically just following Carl as he is going through the levels of this dungeon. That's what I meant to call it. It's a dungeon, Deja, duh. So he's like in this labyrinth dungeon going through the levels. It's literally as big as the entire world. And so all of the people who survived this earth crushing are now in this game, and they are being watched by basically like aliens or like people from another planet dimension kind of thing. And it's almost kind of like the Hunger Games, but in a dungeon setting with levels, and you level up, and there's like different things, more like a video game. So like if the Hunger Games was a video game, it would be this, but it is way more funny. It is super fun and hilarious. I do have two like complaints about the story, which is why I didn't get a full 5-star for me. One, I feel like it began to become repetitive, and so I feel like we were just following him doing kind of like the same things, because a video game in itself is repetitive, and so the story became a little bit repetitive. And then also the second thing is that some of the things that were talked about towards women in the story were not my favorite. There were some comments that I was like, that didn't have to be made, but I understand that's kind of like how video games are and how this community is. So I don't know if like those are the beliefs of the author, or if the author was just trying to portray this kind of community and video games realistically. But it wasn't my favorite. It wasn't really, really bad, but it was just like a little, you know, like a little. And my last 4-star was Only for the Week by Natasha Bishop. This one is a romance where basically we're following this woman, and she is in this wedding. She is the maid of honor, and she is actually the sister of the bride. She's also the ex of the groom, and on this trip begins to sleep with the best man. So it's a destination wedding, and the bride and groom invited everybody who was in the wedding party out like a week early so they could all like, you know, have just a good time before the wedding. And on that trip, she begins to sleep with the best man. And I love their romance. I feel like Black authors in romance always know how to write chemistry so well, and I just love the way that the story was written. There's just like certain things, like she wants to read on the beach, right? She wants to read by the water. That's the one thing she wants to do, but her sister is being a bridezilla, so she can't. So the man in the book steals her away and is like, you're gonna read by the water, and rents out an entire yacht for her to just be able to read. Like, it's just things like that I'm like, yeah. This one was so fun, and I highly recommend it if you're looking for like a summery romance, because again, it has to do with the wedding, and it is a destination wedding. So I feel like both those things lend themselves really well to the summer. It does have smut in it, so if you're not a smut reader, I wouldn't really read this because I don't think that you would like it. But it was good to me, and it didn't overshadow the story too much. It was just perfect. Now we're getting into my 4.5 stars. The first one that I actually read for that spring reading vlog as well, and that is A Botanical Daughter, and this one was so good. I honestly might bump it up to a 5-star because it might be in my favorites of the year. I love this one. It is basically a Frankenstein retelling where we're following two men who are in, I think I want to say Victorian England, and they live together. They're queer, they're in a relationship, not very, you know, normal for the time, but that's what they're doing. And one of them is really into botany and the other one is really into taxidermy, and the one who's into botany ends up getting this plant, and he's like, you know what, I think this plant could be sentient. And so him and the other man with the taxidermy basically create this plant corpse hybrid and begin to care and nurture for it as if it was their own child. It is crazy. It is insane. It is not like a super plot driven horror story. It is definitely heavily character driven. But something about it, just, I loved it so much. I loved the Frankenstein vibes. I loved the era. I loved it was queer in multiple different ways. I don't want to spoil it, but it was queer in multiple different ways. And just the horror of like these people creating this monster and caring for it as it was their own child was so insane and crazy to me. I absolutely loved and adored it. It was so good. Like, I loved every single thing about this story. My next 4.5 star is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I liked this one so much. This one is one of the prequel novellas to the Hunger Games. We were doing a read along for the series on my Patreon, so we just wrapped it up with the most recent release, which was this one. And so obviously the Hunger Games basically follows Katniss Everdeen, and she is part of this world, or this country of Panem, where basically there's a capital and then there's 12 districts, and every single year the capital chooses a boy and a girl from each district and sends them into this arena where they watch these children kill each other and fight to the death until there is one winner. And so that we follow Katniss in the main trilogy as that is going on. And then there's this character Haymitch, who is basically a previous winner of the Hunger Games, who also is from the same district as Katniss, and he is her mentor through the games. And so we are following him in this story as he is, you know, going through his own Hunger Games. And I really liked this one because I felt like it was truly a Hunger Games book. I really like this Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes too, which follows President Snow, who is the president of Panem, when he was younger and kind of first got involved in the games. And so I liked that one, but this one I really loved it because we were back in the arena. I loved being back in the arena. It did something for me. It was so heartbreaking. It was honestly, like, truly tragic. It was a very tragic story, and as I said, it was just heartbreaking. And I feel like a lot of people at first are not very understanding of Haymitch in the original, like, trilogy or, like, in the movies, because he is kind of a drunkard. He is, you know, not the best mentor, but you could tell that he cares, and you really see why in the story he is the way that he is, because he is so traumatized with what he went through, being the sole survivor of the Hunger Games and losing all these people that he became close to. It was so tragic. It was so good. I love this series so much. I love this world, and just being back in it was amazing. Like, being able to read new stories in a world that I love is so comforting, but also like adds to the experience. It's so good, and I just loved it. My next 4.5 star is Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna. This one was really good. I thought it was going to be a 5-star, which it wasn't, but it was still really, really good. And so we're basically following these two girls who ended up finding each other on this road called Firefly Lane. They were neighbors, and they lived very different lives. One of them lives a very stereotypical life, like with her 2 parents and her sibling, and then the other one, she kind of has a mom who's like addicted to drugs, kind of a deadbeat. Her father's not in her life. She's partially raised by her grandma, partially raised by her mom, and they end up striking up a friendship when they are teenagers. I believe this one starts in like the 70s or the 80s, and we follow them all the way through present day, through everything. And so we're following their lives as they go to college together, as they are making their careers, as they have families, as they get married and have relationships, and just following them throughout their lives. And this one does get very heartbreaking in the end as well. I would look up trigger warnings if you have triggers, because I feel like this one could definitely trigger people. But I love seeing these women formed such a bond, and like this, it was such a real friendship. I feel like a lot of times in books they portray friendships as like very dandy. I feel like they portray them as great and grand and everything's perfect all the time and you guys always get along. But in this story, it was real. It showed how relationships, even friendships, can be tumultuous, especially ones that are spanning over years and years and stages of life. And people change, people develop, people grow apart, people grow together. And I feel like in this story we really explored all the facets of friendship, female friendship, and I just really, really loved it. It was so heartbreaking in the end, but it was really amazing. It was really good. I highly recommend this one. And the last book was a 5-star, and that is Vera Wong's Guide to Snooping on a Dead Man. This is the second book in the Vera Wong series, which I absolutely love and adore. I love all of Jessie Kusitano's work. So we're following Vera Wong, and she owns a tea shop. She's an older Chinese lady. She's like in her 60s, I want to say, and she in the first book ends up solving a murder of some man that she found dead in her tea shop, and she creates this found family in the first book. She also has a son who's dating a woman police officer. It's really amazing. It's really great. And then in this book, we're following her solving another murder, and it was so good. I love seeing her create like another found family, like another group of people. She brought them together when she was trying to solve this mystery. And she kind of introduced this newfound family to her found family from the first book. And it was so good. I love seeing this big group come together. I love all the characters. And Vera is so funny. Like, she is just so sassy and spicy and fiery. But she's also kind of like this little frail woman. But she's not scared. She knows that she's smaller. She knows that she's vulnerable. But that doesn't stop her from doing what she thinks is right and doing what she wants to do. And I love her. She's just so great. She really makes these books for me. I loved the direction that the mystery went in this one. It went kind of in a different direction than I ever thought would happen for this series, and I just thought it was really fun and like unique, and I just love Jessie Kusitano. Her work really, really does something for me. I love Vera, her characters, everything. Like, it is so amazing. So those are the books that I read in the month of May. I'm almost done with the last row of book 31. I just have this little length left to go until I'm done with book 31. So I crocheted really like 2 books in this time. But let me know what your favorite book of the month was down below. I would love to know. And while you're down there, leave a little teacup emoji down below for Vera, and I will see you on the next one. Bye, everybody. You got the nerve to be on me, taking your life for the you got my number, don't have me, 'cause baby, I'm